download our Revise It Right revision app for hundreds of videos, quizzes, exam questions, tutor support and so much more. This video is about cell organisation. Organisms are made up of cells. Now we define a cell as the basic building blocks of life. You just have to imagine a piece of Lego. Now if we get one bit of Lego, we can kind of call that our cell, but you put that together with many other pieces of Lego and you can build something. Now much like animals and much like organisms, they are built up of lots and lots of different cells joined together, all doing different things to create the organism. So we can define a cell as the basic building blocks of life. Now tissues, which is a term you may have heard of before, are a group of similar cells that work together to carry out a particular function. Okay, so let's go through an example. What you might have if I draw you here is a muscle cell. Now we looked at these in a previous video. Now this is one muscle cell, but that muscle cell doesn't exist on its own within our bodies. That joins together with other muscle cells to form something called a muscle tissue. So tissues are a group of similar cells, so muscle cells form muscle tissue that work together to carry out a particular function. So muscle cells join together to form muscle tissues that work together to carry out the function of movement. We can also go for another example of epithelial cells, or ciliated epithelial cells. Okay, on their own it's a ciliated epithelial cell, but again they don't exist on their own. They join together with other epithelial cells to form epithelial tissue. So just to reiterate, tissues are a group of similar cells that work together to carry out a particular function. Remember to download our Revise It Right revision app, watch over 700 videos, answer 4,000 plus quiz questions, over 1,000 flashcards, 1,000 exam questions, worksheets, forums, and get help from qualified teachers and so much more. The link is in the description. So now we have organs, which is definitely something that we've all heard of, but we need to be able to define. So organs are a group of different tissues, in this case different tissues, that work together to perform a certain function. Okay, so for this example I'm going to use the stomach as an example. So the stomach is an organ. This is the stomach here, and that's an organ. Okay, there's lots of different functions of the stomach. One, to break down the food by churning the food, the muscles. It also contains this hydrochloric acid to help digest the food with its enzymes. But that stomach is actually made up of different tissues, and that's what we call an organ. Something is made up of different tissues. So what you'll find in that stomach is muscle tissue, for example. Okay, so just like we've drawn before, muscle tissue. Now you'll remember the function of the muscle tissue within the stomach is to move, to churn the food. That's one tissue the stomach is made up of. You also remember that we looked into epithelial tissue. This is also in the stomach, so epithelial tissue. Now the job of the epithelial tissue is to cover the outside and inside of the stomach, to kind of act like a protective layer. Okay, so that's two tissues already that you'll find in our stomach. So it's made up of muscle tissue, epithelial tissue. Another tissue is glandular tissue. So glandular tissue. And obviously, because this is a tissue, it is made up of a group of similar cells. Now the function of the glandular tissue is to make digestive juices, okay, which helped to digest the food. Okay, so at a very, very basic level, the stomach is made up of lots of cells. These cells form our different tissues, and then these tissues all join together to make our organ, which is the stomach, and they all have similar but different jobs, all working together to form one function, i.e. to help digest the food. Okay, so every organ in our body is made up of tissues. You don't have to learn the specific tissues that make up all the organs in our body, but just be aware that organs are a group of different tissues that work together to perform a certain function. And in terms of our stomach, it's made up of muscle tissue, epithelial tissue, and glandular tissue. So now we move on to an organ system. So an organ system is a group of organs working together to perform a particular function. Okay, so you would have, over your course of learning, looked at and studied lots of different types of organ systems. Okay, we've got our circulatory system, for example, which is all to do with our blood. So it contains the heart and the blood vessels. You've got the respiratory system, which is obviously to do with our breathing and our lungs. There are lots of different organ systems. The nervous system, okay, the skeletal system. Now you don't have to learn about each of these individually, so don't worry. The ones that you do have to learn about, we'll talk you through in future videos. The next video is going to be on the digestive system. Now that is an example of an organ system, okay, and we're going to be learning about that next. But for now, all you need to be aware about is that an organ system is a group of organs working together to perform a particular function. And there are lots of different examples of that. So the digestive system is made up of lots of organs. It's made up of the stomach, the small intestine, the large intestine, the pancreas. Lots of different organs make up that organ system. So what I want you to have a go at now is pausing the video and have a go at answering these questions. There's quite a lot of questions, but they're good at really testing your understanding on this topic. Once you've finished, play the video and we'll go through the answers. So pause the video now. Okay, so lots of questions here, so let's go through them. Okay, so defining a tissue is the first of all. So a tissue is a group of similar cells that work together to carry out a particular function. So that hopefully that's what you got for number one. A group of similar cells that work together to carry out a particular function. That is a good definition. Question 2, we move on to defining an organ. So an organ is a group of different tissues this time that work together to perform a certain function. Okay, so a group of tissues, of different tissues that work together to perform a certain function. Good definition. List the organisation levels from the simplest to the more complex. Okay, so I'll do this for you up here. So at the basic level, we've got our cells at our very, very basic level. Now these form to make tissues, which then form to make organs. Now they form to make organ systems, and then they form to make an organism, which is what we are, a living thing, an organism. Okay, so cells, tissues, organs, organ system, and organism. Number 5, what is the difference between an organ and an organ system? Well, an organ, as we just said, is a group of different tissues that work together to perform a certain function, whereas organ systems are a group of organs working together to perform a particular function. So the difference is what they are made up of. Organs are made up of tissues, organ systems are made up of organs. Number 6, what is the specialised cell that forms muscle tissue? Well, the clue is very much in the name there. Muscle tissue is made up of muscle cells. So number 7, the stomach contains mainly 3 types of tissue, state their functions. So we just looked at this. The muscular tissue is about movement. Remember, muscle is always about movement. Movement to churn the food. Okay, movement to churn the food. The glandular tissue makes the digestive juices, which help to digest the food. That contains enzymes, and we'll look at that in a future video. The epithelial tissue covers the outside and the inside of the stomach to act as a protective layer. So that is the function of the epithelial tissue. So for number 8, decide for each of the following if they are a specialised cell, a tissue or an organ. Explain and state their function. Okay, so the pancreas is an organ. Okay, so the pancreas is an organ, the neuron is a cell, and the kidney is an organ. Okay, so pancreas organ, neuron is a cell, and the kidney is an organ. And then finally, Max says the skin is an organ because it is made up of epithelial, muscle, and glandular tissue. Is he correct? Yes, he is correct. And that is because an organ is made up of tissues or different tissues that work together, and the skin is made up of epithelial, muscle, and glandular tissue. Therefore, it is made up of different tissues that work together. So therefore, yes, the skin is an organ. So that's the answer to that, and that's the reasoning. Okay, so we have now looked at organisation and cell organisation and how we are organised. You can now move on to the quiz and the exam questions to start really testing yourself on these topics. If you don't understand and you are a paying customer, you can of course contact one of our tutors for help